Welcome to the Accountability Board, 10th of September at Police Headquarters. Today, if we just do a quick round of introductions, I'm Gary Godden and I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Michelle Buttery, Chief Executive of the OPCC.
Dan Howett, Head of Strategy and Performance for the PCC.
Chloe Wilson, Policy and Scrutiny Manager.
Danny Baker, Head of Finance.
Kate Mann, Chief Constable.
Chief Inspector John Hewitt, working on the Neighbourhood Change Project.
Chris Pearson, Superintendent for the City and Force Lead for Neighbourhood Policing.
Leonie Sco, Head of Crime and Criminal Justice.
Also present are my media team as well while they're filming this. So welcome everybody and thank you for attending. This is the public agenda to go out to our communities to discuss issues around. Today the chosen subject is obviously going to be antisocial behaviour, but there will be updates from the Chief with regards to HMIC FRS and penal inspection, and also with regard to updates on the College of Policing and the Valdo Calican case. So I shall pass over to the Chief now for the update on the HMIC FRS penal inspection.
Okay, thank you very much. So as you're aware, we've got three causes of concern that we're looking at. One around investigations, how we manage and supervise effective investigations, making sure victims get the support they need. Second one around our governance and performance processes, and third around neighbourhood policing and prevention. So in relation to Operation Catalyst, as you just mentioned, that's our response to the engaged status we find ourselves in. We are due to attend PPOG on the 24th of this month, where we'll be able to give a really full update to the HMIC FRS about the progress that we've made against each of the causes of concern. Just start off with each of the causes of concern, just go through the work that we've done. So around investigations, we have delivered training to the organisation, to all officers and staff who are involved in investigations. That's then been further supported by a learning package that's been delivered as well. And we're starting to see now some really positive signs in terms of our performance in relation to investigations. So in terms of supervisory updates, 95% of the crimes have got supervisory updates, and likewise 95% have got investigation updates as well. So we're starting to see some real progress with that. We continue to do the work around investigations. Probably worth mentioning also, we're seeing ourselves performing really well in terms of prosecutions and cases that get to court. So we're really sort of focusing on the quality of our investigations, but making sure that the victim care that goes alongside those is also of the highest possible standard. We'll go to cause of concern 2. It looked around performance, but raised concerns around our domestic abuse support unit. Does secondary assessments around domestic abuse and whether we were actually keeping on top and up to date with these assessments. Since the identification of the concern by HMIC in March, we've managed those numbers and that workload effectively ever since that date, even through sort of periods of leave and high absences in the department and bank holidays. So we are hoping that the HMIC will be coming in very soon to look at our performance around that area of policing. As I say, it is around the secondary assessments around domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And finally, around enabled policing, we are in the process of implementing our new enabled policing model. That will be launched in October. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about that in a minute, so I won't give you too much detail. But that's making sure that we've got a coordinated, consistent model across the organisation, and that we're also limiting the abstractions from those officers and staff that work within neighbourhoods, so they are able to dedicate the work that they do to the neighbourhoods that they work in. So again, you'll get some more detail about that from my colleagues, but we're doing a lot of work around neighbourhood policing, and also making sure that we can measure the abstractions as well. We've got a process in place now, so we can tell if neighbourhood officers and staff are taken off their area, so we can help manage that as well. So we've got that to enable us to measure our performance around that. And I think that was it really around those three causes of concern. If I can give you some more detail if needed, but we feel we're making good progress.
No, that sounds good and it sounds positive. In terms of the speed of progress, how are you feeling that is going in terms of the whole response to it?
So we've set ourselves milestones in places we want to achieve, and we've hit every single one of those. I think the challenge for us now is, whilst we've made the changes, to make sure that we continue progressing those, and that we start to make sure that they are sustainable and sustained within the organisation. So that is a lot of the work we're doing now. So the changes have been made, we just now need to make sure that they get embedded within the organisation.
Okay. And what do you feel are some of the positives coming out of the inspection obviously the Peel inspection, but in response to our communities and the improved service perhaps that they may well receive?
Yeah, so I think for the first thing then is around everything that we've implemented, we've had a lot of support from nationally in relation to that. So we are really confident that whatever we've put in place is consistent with what good practice is nationally. So we've had a lot of support from the College of Policing and a lot of support from the National Police Chiefs Council. And what that means to the communities that we serve is that in terms of our neighbourhood model that we're going to speak about in a moment, all of that has been checked by the College of Policing. So any new systems that we're putting in place, any new approach, any performance measures that we're using are all approved by the College of Policing, who say that sort of consistent with the highest standards. So that is a real benefit in terms of being able to access that knowledge and that good practice nationally. And I think the other thing really is around a real focus within the organisation. So everybody within the organisation is really clear about what we're trying to achieve, really clear about the work we're doing around investigations, what we're doing around neighbourhoods. So there's that real clarity of purpose and that real consistent focus in those areas. So that's enabling us to get the progress that we want, but also to deliver the highest standards that we possibly can.
Okay. And obviously next week we've got a meeting with the Inspectorate. How are you feeling that they are going to respond to part 2 of Catalyst, which is going down there as a plan?
So we've already briefed them initially about the work we have been done already, and they're really pleased with that. The feedback we've had initially from our document and our presentation is also that it's good, that we're showing good signs of progress. I think it's fair to say they're happy with what we've done to date. They'll be looking now to make sure that it's embedded within the organisation. I think that's the next challenge for us really. Those changes have been put in place. Now we need to make sure that they stay in place and we stay focused to deliver against them.
Great. Michelle, anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so, Commissioner.
Dan?
We've had detailed briefings. The office have been involved in the force meetings.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so over to you, Michelle, for an update on the College of Policing review into Nottinghamshire's police handling of Valdo Calicane.
It's a very short update this time, Commissioner. No change since the last meeting.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Right, and now we go over, I think it's to Chief Inspector John Hewitt, who will talk about tackling antisocial behaviour and other issues of local concern.
I'm going to deliver the
All right,
presentation.
okay.
If that's all right,
I do
Commissioner. Sorry for
apologise.
pain, okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk very briefly about tackling antisocial behaviour and other issues of local concern across Nottinghamshire, how we set our priorities, and how to promote opportunities to escalate issues of concern within the local community. So currently, each of our 12 neighbourhood policing inspectors are responsible for setting their local policing priorities, and that is a process that takes place each quarter. Generally speaking, that's based on feedback from local communities, and we find a lot of local concerns such as drug supply, dangerous use of vehicles, off-road motorbikes, etc. So we get a lot of feedback around issues like that from local communities. The inspectors identify their local priorities, and they are published on the Force website, and each month the inspectors are required to provide an update about what problem solving activity has taken place. So really a user-needed approach across all of our neighbourhood policing areas. What we have found through the neighbourhood policing programme that we've been undertaking over the last few months is that there has been some differing practice across the organisation. Much of that is down to the way that the local neighbourhood policing teams perhaps interact with different local authorities, so therefore there are different surveys out there, there are different ways of getting that feedback from the community. So what we've really wanted to focus on is making sure there's a clear and consistent process across the whole of Nottinghamshire, so that members of the public know how to escalate issues of concern to us, and most importantly we can be absolutely sure that we're evidence-based in how we tackle and identify local issues. Next slide, please. During the HMRC inspection, one of the areas for improvement was that the force should improve the way it consults all its diverse communities to make sure their needs are identified and used to influence priorities. So that's something that we've been really looking at quite closely through the neighbourhood change management process. So what we've been doing and what John has been working on is a new community engagement process for each area. So each of our 12 neighbourhood policing areas will have an annual community profile. So that community profile It's based on data from the NOTS alert system. It tells us which communities live where in Nottinghamshire, so really important. It tells us where our engagement gaps are, and it tells us where we need to focus more of our police resources to make sure we're engaging with seldom heard communities, for example. Underpinning that annual profile will be an engagement plan. So each neighbourhood policing inspector will have a plan of engagement. That will be a very forward-facing document. So what engagement activity are we undertaking over the next quarter? And we will be very proactive in making sure that we are advertising planned engagement events such as beat surgeries, and we are looking at more innovative ways of holding those, so for example using social media and other sort of electronic platforms available to us as well. So there'll be an engagement plan and community profile for each of our 12 neighbourhood areas, very forward facing, open to scrutiny, and making sure therefore through the relevant governance processes that we're putting in place that we are engaging with as many of our communities as possible. As the Chief Constable has already mentioned, throughout the Neighbourhood Change Programme we've been working really closely with the College of Policing and other forces from across the country. So both John and I have been to visit Greater Manchester Police. That's really helped us to make sure that we are setting and maintaining the really high standards that we want here in Nottinghamshire, but we're taking learning from other forces as well who have been on a similar journey to us. We are implementing a standardised governance structure across neighbourhood policing. I've talked about that very briefly, but we are going to implement a multi-agency problem-solving meeting on each of the 12 neighbourhood policing areas. What that will mean is that when we've identified our priorities from members of the public's feedback, there will be a really clear and consistent governance process for making sure those local issues are identified and tackled. It will be partnership driven from the outset, which is not something we've perhaps done in our previous governance meetings. And we will have a really important comms footprint into that, so that we're really proactive in telling the public what we've been focused on for the last month or last quarter, so very forward facing with our communications as well. I've mentioned our engagement plans and community profiles already. Obviously that will help us to make sure that we assess community impact following any serious incidents that take place across Nottinghamshire, so we know that's really important, but also will help us to deliver against some of our priorities, for example the race action plan and violence towards women and girls as well. I wanted to talk about NOTS Alert because this is a really important piece of the jigsaw for me. So as an organisation, we've decided to adopt NOTS Alert as our two-way messaging system to engage with the public. It's used widely throughout policing across the country, and I think actually it is the go-to system for us in policing. What I particularly like about NOTS Alert is it allows us to conduct surveys with members of the public. So members of the public can tell us what really matters to them, and it automatically generates analytical products so that we know where to focus our time and resource. I think that's really important when we want to understand what matters to communities, particularly around antisocial behaviour. So that survey is already on the system and can be undertaken quarterly if members of the public sign up to use the system. On top of that, we can share alerts about crime or antisocial behaviour that might be happening in the local community. We can reach out to members of the community when there's been a crime and actually identify who might have private CCTV, for example. So we can really use it as a witness appeal opportunity. Excuse me. And it also contains analytical data that tells us where some of our communities live as well. So we can target our engagement work, target our sign-up work for NOTS Alert as well, to make sure that we get as wide a customer base on there as possible, and we're very representative then of our communities. So over the next few weeks and coming months, we're going to be doing an awful lot of work to make sure that we increase the number of people that are using that system, so we can truly understand what matters to our people. Next slide, please. This outlines our priority setting process, and I've touched on it, but I'll run through it very quickly. So the local neighbourhood policing inspectors will receive the NOTS Alert survey quarterly. that survey available online to all members of the public. It's there already, it is live, and I would really encourage members of the public to use it. The inspectors will hold a quarterly priority setting meeting. Generally we say there will be up to 3 priorities per policing area, so per neighbourhood policing area. I'm very clear with our inspectors that actually they should be quite specific priorities, so the public really know where we are focusing our time and energy. So for example, it might be antisocial behaviour on a local park. I think we should be really specific with those priorities. Once the priorities are set, we will be publishing those on the neighbourhood pages of our website, and we will share those priorities back to the public through the Knots Alert system as well. So they will know where their priorities have been shared, and they will know which priorities we've set. Each priority that we identify will have a problem solving plan. We've got some really good support from the Prevention Hub to make sure that those problem solving plans are of the high standards that we would expect. They're partnership driven, and we are really assessing as an organisation what problem solving work and interventions are effective in the community, and we're sharing that best practice across Nottinghamshire Police. We will then communicate back, of course, with the public using a variety of different means, so social media, Knots Alert, events that we may hold in the community. Exactly what work we've been doing for the last month, and I mentioned it earlier, but really introducing the you said we did approach and empowering our communities that actually, if you're very clear with us about what matters to you, we will identify the right priorities and take action in the community. Finally, I wanted to just touch on 2 points I really just wanted to touch on, Commissioner, if I can. So first of all was the independent advisory groups. So Mr. Verma's done a huge amount of work on this, and I think it's been a massive step forward for us to actually now have a number of subgroups for the independent advisory groups across Nottinghamshire. I know, because I've seen the huge amount of work that Inspector Gaskin, for example, has done around the student community, that actually being able to engage with our community leaders and with those who have a really vested interest in working together with the police and our partners, some really good advice that we get from our IAGs. I certainly really felt their support during the recent unrest across the country and protests within the city, for example. So I think this is a really important framework to engage with communities, understand concerns, and ultimately, of course, increase that two-way communication. And finally, I just wanted to end on immediate justice. So I've been leading on this for Nottinghamshire Police since it was launched in January this year, working together with your office. Over 200 adults have been referred into immediate justice. In fact, that figure yesterday is around 240 now. So they've been referred into immediate justice as part of an out-of-court disposal. And they are offenders who have been involved in generally low-level crimes, so low-value criminal damage, low-value theft, but also some other offence types such as drunken disorderly in the city centre and drugs possession as well. And those offenders have been out in the community undertaking around 7 hours of reparative activity to put right the harm that they've caused in local communities. So we recently ran a day of action over at Asda in Hyson Green. It is one of the Force's #1 hotspots for antisocial behaviour. All of the data tells us that. And we had offenders come from as far away as Leicestershire to actually take part in litter picking and tidying up that local area to put right the harm that they've caused. Today there's been a separate day of action in Mansfield as well, and that's another antisocial behaviour hotspot. So we're actually listening to the public by enabling them to use the Fix My Street app to tell us where they would like that work to take place. We've had over 89 responses from the community already, and we're now working through all of those locations to make sure that we can get reparative activity undertaken in as many of those as possible. Alongside this, we also refer the offenders then into a diversionary scheme as well. So really looking to address the root cause of offending behaviour. So for example, maybe alcohol support or substance use support. So it's been really successful so far. We are about to switch on a separate piece of work in here for young people as well. And our local authorities are also on board now. So environmental crime and ASB can be referred into immediate justice as well. So really powerful, and we're really enjoying the fact that the public are working really closely with us on that programme by telling us where they want that work to take place.
Okay, absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
And that is it from me. Thank
Great.
you.
No, thank you for that. Really interesting. There's a lot to unpack there and a lot of information there for members of the community. So, firstly, thank you for putting that in such an easy to understand explanation, and I think in many ways a reflection of some of this work is already starting to take hold in the city of Nottingham. As you've mentioned, we touch on the disorder because for me anyway, the public response to that is a very positive response towards the police, and I know that you've been working a lot with a lot of the communities to give them the confidence that the police can look after them and make sure that they're safe. So I do thank you for that. There are some questions I need to ask you, and a lot of them are you've probably touched on them in there, so it might be sort of you're repeating yourself, but the reality is that I really want the communities to understand what they need to do when they are experiencing antisocial behaviour, to have that confidence that the police will come, they will sort it out, and there will be action taken. It's really important that they understand that. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, if a member of the public is experiencing antisocial behaviour, how do they go about reporting it? And what reporting tools are there available, and how do they know which agency is best to contact?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is there are a number of different ways that antisocial behaviour can be reported to us. First of all, via 101, so the standard telephone line into our control room. If a crime is in progress or life is at risk, then the 999 system available as well. We do use Single Online Home as our force website, which actually is a very intuitive wizard that takes you through reporting antisocial behaviour as well. What's really good about that system is it actually asks you some questions about what's happened and will advise on who is the best agency for you to report antisocial behaviour to. So that's quite a useful tool for members of the public if they're a bit unsure about whether it's a local authority issue or a police issue. We are in the process of introducing 2 new antisocial behaviour officers into our force control room. They are due to land next month, and we will be the first force in the country to have dedicated resource that assesses reports of antisocial behaviour to make sure that they're in the right place, and if they're not, to make sure that local authorities are notified and that we engage with the public to make sure that they understand who the most appropriate agency is to deal with their concerns.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that one. Next question is, we have received questions from a number of residents about areas of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, so it's not specific, where they don't feel safe, either due to groups of people being rude and aggressive in public or antisocial behaviour and begging, and also street drinking. I just want to thank Jane from Beeston and Louise from Bulwell for putting this question in. How can residents best highlight these longer term antisocial behaviour related issues to the police and partner agencies? And what's the opportunity to highlight neighbourhood priority setting processes and using the Fix My Street tool?
So I think the first part is we really need to know about the issues when they're happening to make sure that we can provide the most appropriate response. So I would always encourage members of the public to call us at the time. As I've said, we will assess those reports and make sure that we provide the most appropriate response. Where we don't provide an immediate response, we are then very data driven in how we deploy our neighbourhood policing resources. So it's really important that we know about the issues. Then through our analytical programmes that we've got, and all the neighbourhood policing teams have access to data about what's being reported in the community, we can use that data to inform our patrols, first of all, but secondly, the partnership work that's being undertaken. So, for example, in my presentation, I mentioned our move to a multi-agency problem-solving arena. So those MAPS meetings will be fed by data that is available to the police and local authority. Some of the issues that are reported to us, such as, for example, people feeling unsafe in alleyways, really do need that partnership approach, but they need the longer term problem solving approach as well. for example, where we may look to identify funding to cut back bushes, install lighting, or even in the most extreme cases, look to apply to close off alleyways where people feel unsafe. So while it may not be that we can address all the community issues immediately, if they are reported to us, we will assess them and we'll make sure they get fed into the right place.
Great, thank you very much for that. Again, I'm going to ask you a question that's probably a little bit repetitive in what you're going to touch on, but I just want to make sure that we're clear on so that the public can see how to deal with this issue. How are neighbourhood priorities developed, and how can residents get involved in this process? And I think you've kind of touched on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the NOTS Alert priority setting survey is now live. So I would really encourage members of the public to sign up to use that system. It's really quick and easy to do, and it will mean that our community members get updates from the police about crime or antisocial behaviour taking place in the community. But most importantly, they can tell us what's important to them. That data is provided to the neighbourhood police and inspectors. They do get that data very quickly, but we'll review it on a quarterly basis to make sure that we identify and set our policing priorities. They are provided with some different additional sources of data as well, such as our own performance matrix. So what does crime and antisocial behaviour look like on a wider basis in the local community? And then we will communicate with the public through NOTS Alert and through our social media channels what the priorities are for the next quarter, and most importantly, how we've come to those priorities.
Okay. One of the challenges in that, our engagement with young people, so that's via Youth Commission and Youth IAG, suggests that very few are aware of the NOTS Alert service. So how are you going to engage with young people in our area on the issues that matter most to them?
So I think it's really important for me. This is so during the protest, for example, Commissioner, I met with a number of youth workers and other agencies that, for example, are on the streets providing reassurance in the city. I think there is some work for us to do to make sure that we, first of all, let them know that NOTS Alert is there. It is a system that can be used by all. But most importantly, that where young people make disclosures about what concerns them, we are engaging with those professionals to get that feedback and advice. One of the things we're doing through Safer Streets this year is a youth listening exercise, which we funded in the city with Nottingham University. So they are undertaking a piece of work to engage with young people in the city. To build trust and confidence with the police and some of our partner agencies, but most importantly to make sure that we're listening to them. We understand, for example, where they feel unsafe, what makes them feel unsafe, and how we can work in partnership then to make Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire a safer place for them. So we're expecting a report to come to us a little bit later this year, and then we have some funding available through Safer Streets to implement the recommendations as well.
Great, thank you very much. I've got two other questions for you. One of the topical, I suppose, areas of complaint that we get is e-scooters. A little bit of information around. I'm just going to read just two statements from members of the public who have been kind enough to put some questions in. What are you doing about the use of illegal e-scooters on public roads? I often see them zooming past your police station on the pavement without a care in the world. Why should we believe you want to do anything about it? And that's from Mark in Nottinghamshire. And what will be done to tackle the illegal use of electric scooters? We have an issue with them being used by people dealing drugs. Why is it not enforced that they are illegal to be used on the public highways? And that's from Richard in Stapleford. So thank you for those questions. The sort of question I want to ask is, obviously I know that the illegal use of e-scooters is a big concern for many people. It's a very topical issue that we have coming into the office on quite a regular occasion. And obviously we've received questions on this topic, which I've just read to you from Mark and Richard. What is the force's response to the use of illegal scooters? Is it something that you will actively enforce? And where and how should residents report this issue? And how are you providing feedback to communities to take action? So do you want me to read that again for you?
I think I'll start and then ask me any further.
No, okay,
Commissioner. So First off, in terms of how the public can let us know, as with any other issue, if it's happening there and then, and you need us, you phone 101, and obviously the appropriate resources will be allocated to that. If it's an ongoing issue, you're in your town centre and you see e-scooters regularly, you can tell us through the Not So Late Priority Setting Survey, and you can specifically on there, say what the issues are and where they're happening. In terms of what we do with e-scooters, I think there's two important parts in relation to e-scooters. So e-scooters coming into the country, it's been quite a fast-paced evolution over the last couple of years as the technology's come in, and there is a legislative gap in relation to e-scooters. So we've got e-scooters, but no new legislation has come in. So I think the last government were looking at it, but ran out of time. But where we are at the moment, the current stance is e-scooters are a motor vehicle. So to use a motor scooter in a public place, you've got to have all the same things that you would to drive a car or a motorbike. So the relevant licence, insurance, and the scooter needs to be roadworthy or have an MOT. Now, what the government's brought into trial the use of scooters and look at reducing carbon emissions, etc., is trialling them in certain cities in the country. So, for example, in Nottingham, you can hire an e-scooter, but if a member of the public is hiring an e-scooter, then it comes with all those things. So from the hiring company, there's got the insurance in place. The presumption is there that your responsibility is to have the right classifications on your licence. It is a roadworthy e-scooter for you to use. So that's a legal method to use an e-scooter on a road in accordance with legislation. Anything else is not lawful. So at the moment, you cannot privately insure a e-scooter or get it checked to make sure it's roadworthy. So all the legislation that comes in for motor vehicles is applicable. So if you have your own private scooter and you're stopped by the police, it can be seized off you for having no insurance or for riding it otherwise in accordance with the licence. And if we seize it off you, you're liable to be prosecuted for those offences, get points on your licence, but also, whilst if you're stopped driving a car and have no insurance, whilst you may be prosecuted, if you get the relevant insurance, you can come to the police, pay the relevant release fees, get your vehicle back. You've got no mechanism to do that for an e-scooter because there is no provision to get it insured. So the message has got to be, obviously, if it's a private e-scooter, you simply cannot ride it in a public place. Really, you're restricted to your garden or someone's private property where they're giving you permission to ride it. Other than that, you simply cannot ride it.
And I don't think the public understand that, do they? So I think pre-Christmas campaigns, presumably you run those sorts of things for parents who...
That was the other part I was going to come on to. So our communications team have produced a wealth of different products to help us educate the public. So that's the other thing we recognise is, whilst you cannot legally ride a scooter, there's a lot of the public that probably look at an e-scooter and either think of it as a toy or they think of it as similar to an electric cycle, for example, something along them lines. And legislatively, it's not yet. Obviously, we don't know how it will be legislated, but at the moment, the law as it stands for the police to enforce is that it is a motor vehicle.
Fine. Okay, that's clear as day for me. So that's a really good explanation. Thank you very much for that. Just a last question on ASB, because I think it's important. If a member of the public is dissatisfied with the response to tackling an ASB or an issue of local concern, what action can be taken?
So members of the public can request what we call a community trigger. That can be done on our website. In its simplest form, it is an ASB case review. In Nottinghamshire, they are generally chaired by local authorities, but the police can do them as well. And we have all the right people around the table to review the action that has been undertaken to try and resolve that ASB issue. It will also, that case review will look at any recommendations for any of the partners involved to try and improve the standards of service that we provide. We will always feed back within relevant legal timescales to the complainant, if you like. And if they're unhappy after that, there is an escalation process as well for independent review.
Right, fantastic. So on ASB and local concerns, I will close it off there. Can I just thank you for the input that you both put in there? Very clear very precise. One of my priorities is obviously neighbourhood policing and antisocial behaviour. I kind of think that they kind of go hand in hand a little bit, and one helps the other. So I'm hoping that over the next few months, as neighbourhood policing becomes more entrenched in the workings of Nottinghamshire Police, the results of all of this really start to our communities really start to feel the difference. So once again, thank you for your clear and precise explanations on what's legal and what's not legal. Really good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'll go over to the second part now, and Detective Chief Superintendent Leona Skur will be talking about improving outcomes for victims of crime and antisocial behaviour. So over to you.
Thank you, good afternoon. So I'll be providing assurance around how we're improving outcomes for victims of crime and antisocial behaviour. And my main focus this afternoon will be around domestic abuse and hate crime. Thought it might be useful to start off by giving some headline figures around our crime performance. So currently over the last 12 months, all crime has reduced by 6.5%, so that's 6,700 fewer victims of crime. And our positive outcome rate over the last rolling 12 months is currently 16.3%. So while that's positive, we know there's more work to do, and there's more engagement to do with communities to make sure we have a true picture, an accurate picture of all crime that's out there, because we accept that some crime is unreported. And we also are striving to improve our outcome rate as well. So our main reductions in crime are around vehicle crime, violence and stalking and harassment. We've had some increases around domestic abuse and some small increases around sexual offences and robbery and retail crime. And our main increases in positive outcomes are around violence, theft, stalking, with some reductions in drugs possession. We do have some challenges in the amount of time it's taking for forensic work to be done, but we have a robust plan around that, and improvements should start to take fruition soon. So, next slide please. So we focus on improving our outcomes for victims through the Chief's 3 priorities, which are very clear and focused and really align with Operation Catalyst really well. So I've already touched on earning the trust and confidence of our communities. So public confidence is absolutely key to reporting crime, because our service is tailored on what we know and how we respond to the community's needs. So if I talk about hate crime here, it's Hate Crime Awareness Week in October, so we'll be focusing really on engagement and building that confidence for communities to report to us. And we know that we can't do that on our own, so we rely on other agencies as well to act as advocates and the voice of victims. So for example, if we talk about domestic abuse, through our Sexual Offences Referral Centre, that's a mechanism of reporting domestic abuse and sexual offences. Through the MARAC process, we work with partners around reporting domestic abuse. There's agencies, and the details are available on our website around Stop Hate, Tell Mama around hate crime. So we can't do it on our own, so we are reliant on other partners and agencies to work with us. Around improving outcomes for victims, not all victims of crime want to go through the criminal justice system. Some people phone up in a moment of need and just want the behaviour to stop. So again, this is where we are focusing on out-of-court resolutions, really improving training to our workforce around being perpetrator-focused. So we're diverting perpetrators away from committing crime and not relying so much on the evidence and the words of the victim as well, taking that pressure off them. And then improving our civil orders really to control offending as well, to give victims that support. And we accept that we have got a workforce that is new to policing, so we're focusing on making sure that our workforce has got the right training and the right tools and equipment to make sure that our investigations are of the highest quality and standard, and that relates to Operation Catalyst that's going on at the moment. So next slide please. So if I focus more on domestic abuse then, as I mentioned, over the last 12 months domestic abuse has increased by 1,000 offences. For me that's an indication that there is more confidence in reporting, but troubling, we perhaps don't understand the true picture of domestic abuse. So we categorise domestic abuse into 3 priorities. So high risk domestic abuse, our positive outcome rate is currently 37%, which is positive, it's increasing and has increased by 10% over the last year. Our overall positive outcome rate is 11.3% and it seems to remain at that level. Our standard risk domestic abuse is where we really need to focus our efforts. That positive outcome rate is currently at 5.9%, so I'll come on to the work that we're doing in that arena. But as a workforce, we've achieved white ribbon status, so we are all committed to tackling those behaviours that really are precursors to domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. So what are we doing then to improve outcomes for victims of domestic abuse? So we have implemented a domestic abuse standards group. We've allocated a Detective Chief Inspector to chair that meeting, which runs every month, and it's a root and branch examination of our performance from point of call, the response categorisation and the investigation standard, really to drive up those standards and look for opportunities where we can pursue evidence-led prosecutions. And we've embarked on some training around that as well. We work with the CPS on our domestic abuse scrutiny panel. So where cases that have been closed as no further action, we look with CPS to see if there have been any missed opportunities there and whether we need to be reinvestigating matters and resurrecting crimes and take away the learning from that. We've increased supervision and resource within our domestic abuse teams, and we're also reviewing our approach to remote video investigation because we can see that an improved speed of contact with the victim at the point of call really does secure their engagement with us and that evidence capture. And we have just delivered a round of training in force around domestic abuse and out-of-court resolutions, particularly around community resolutions. So on average we were probably achieving 6 community resolutions a month for standard risk domestic abuse. After the first month of training in August, that's now going up to 6 requests a day, so I'm quite confident that we'll translate some of the crimes that were perhaps no further action will have a community resolution and that diversion from offending attached to them. We've also increased training and knowledge around domestic violence protection notices as well. So in July we secured 11 domestic violence protection orders, in July we secured 26, and in August we secured 30, so a real improvement there in making sure that where we aren't able to prosecute domestic violence perpetrators, we are protecting victims. So if we move on to hate crime then next. So in terms of hate crime, we have seen a slight increase in reporting in the last 12 months compared to the previous year, only by 5 offences. So roughly on average we get 1,800 hate crimes a year, and our positive outcome rate is 21%. Most of the hate crime that we know about is around words spoken rather than damage or violence. And the main reason that we don't achieve a positive outcome is because the incident happened in a public place, the offender wasn't known and we haven't been able to identify them, or victims simply want the matter recording. But like I say, we really need to make sure that we have that true picture of hate crime, because through our IAGs we are told that people don't have the confidence to report it, so we just need to work with our partners and communities to bridge that gap really, and make sure that we are really communicating accurately and confidently that when a victim does report a crime, we have really good satisfaction and confidence rates. So hate crime satisfaction is at 87%, hate crime confidence is at 89%, so we've exceeded our own target of 85%. So when we just really want to encourage people to report, because the perception of the experience that they will encounter is perhaps quite different to the reality. So like I say, we're going to really shine a light on that in Hate Crime Awareness Week, which runs from the 12th to the 18th of October. And we're just finalising the plans for that. So Mum, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Commissioner, I just wanted to mention, because when following the protests last month, it was, and we went to a couple of meetings, it was a concern raised, wasn't it, around how communities can report hate crime and confidence in doing so. So as a result of what was raised with us then, but also what we've known from the work Leanne has just mentioned, during Hate Crime Awareness Week, we'll be doing some very bespoke work around engaging with communities, talking about how to report hate crime, talking about what the experience will be like as you know, that often these sort of experience is positive. So just to try and sort of bridge that gap a little bit, but certainly because it's been raised, it's something that we need to address, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to do it during this week.
I welcome that.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
Just on the hate crime reporting, if you don't mind, Commissioner, do you know what proportion Leona is third-party reporting of hate crime? Because that obviously can increase some of the reports that are...
I'm sorry, I don't know the proportion that's third party.
But,
yeah, okay. So then I just wanted to update you on the anti-immigration protests that were run under the Operation Yeep. So the graph at the top shows August data, day by day, and how many hate crimes and how many non-crime hate incidents were reported. So you can see a spike there around about the 17th of August. Roughly, we get about 150 hate crimes a month. 17th wasn't actually the day of the main protest, that was the weekend before. But it's just really to reassure the public and acknowledge that the fear of hate crime, it rips through communities, and we want to reassure them really about when we have a protest what the truth is, rather than the false news, the fake news, and reassure them what we're doing to protect them. But that was the hate crime picture for August. And during October last year, when we had the Israel-Gaza conflict as well, there was a slight increase in hate crime around October time. So I just wanted to reassure you around our approach to protest activity that really targets protected characteristics. So every week we have what's called an aconite briefing. So this is where our internet investigations team are constantly researching the internet, our intelligence teams and our events team and partners all come together with all the intelligence that they know and what events that are happening, and where we need to put interventions in place or engagement or reassurance. We feel that we're very ahead of the game and prompt in doing that, because engaging quickly is really key to reassuring communities. So we already have that in place every week to provide that assurance that hopefully we won't miss something. So that constant temperature check. And it's the anniversary of Operation Tarlac next month, actually, the Gaza invasion. So we're already got the gold meetings back in the diary to make plans for that, should we need to. Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Again, very interesting, very precise and concise with your information, which is really good. So I'm just going to go back a little bit and just sort of ask some questions that have been posed to us from members of the public before we sort of come back to the hate crime issue. So just for the benefit of the public, can you briefly explain what the different outcomes, as in closure codes, are following the investigation of crime? How is this set to change over the coming year, and what benefits will the changes bring?
Okay, so there's 22 closure codes. Closure codes 1 to 8 are classed as positive outcomes. So 1 is a charge or a summons to court, so that's going through the full criminal justice process. And then we have out-of-court disposals, which can be a community resolution, a caution, or a cannabis warning. And the remaining codes are, I won't go through them all, but it's, for example, the key ones that we focus on are outcome 18, which is where a suspect isn't identified, outcome 15, which is where there's evidential difficulties, so we can't pursue a prosecution, or outcome 16, which is where a victim doesn't provide evidence or disengages with us. So we know that we need to improve the accuracy of our recording of outcome codes, because we analyse those, and for example outcome 16, I really need to understand why victims aren't engaging with us if we've been accurate in our recording, because then I need to inspect actually have we commissioned the right services, is there more we need to do around how we're treating victims, how we're keeping them updated, how quickly we're getting to them. So those codes are really, really important. They are changing over the next year, probably doubling in number, so we can have that difference between adult and child, again to make sure that we're really using those outcome codes to improve the service we're delivering from the outset.
That's great. So just to go on to outcome 16, because it seems a bit poignant at the moment, HMIC FRS identified the use of outcome 16 as an area of improvement. Obviously that is where the suspect is identified by the victim or witness, but doesn't support further police or criminal justice action. The figure is around about 57% of domestic abuse crimes, and almost a third of all rape and serious sexual offences result in this outcome. How is the force working to minimise the use of outcome 16 where appropriate? And I think in a way you kind of touched on it, what you've already responded to.
Yeah, well, I can go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, if you could, please, yeah.
So as part of Operation Catalyst, we have a quality assurance system in place now. So every month we audit approximately 400 crimes. And part of that quality assurance regime is to check we've got the right outcome code on, and that we have recorded the victim's wishes as to why they won't engage, just to make sure that we are accurate and we are putting that code on appropriately. So we'll have the first 3 months of data, and we'll be able to inspect that in more detail and tailor our services accordingly.
Because going forward it's going to be a big issue with the violence against women and girls agenda, and I think it's just really important that we've kind of got our eye on how do we, again it looks a little bit like it's a lack of confidence sometimes. How do we generate that confidence in victims to really kind of come forward, talk to us about their crimes and really have the confidence that we can do something about it, as difficult as it might be to find the perpetrator. So it's a really sort of important issue, and I welcome the fact that you're going to be bringing some further data that will start analysing this issue, and hopefully we can sort of tailor our services a bit to reach the required necessary figures and targets. So thank you for that. And I know in just question number 4 actually, I know that in Nottingham we are still referring too many people in the youth justice system. So obviously this is a concern. It's a concern for our partners and obviously for ourselves. When compared to other similar areas, what is being done to address this? And do you feel that sufficient use is being made of outcome 22, which obviously enables action to be taken to prevent reoffending where there is no admission or guilt?
Yeah, so we're working really hard to make sure that within the investigations arena and within the custody arena that we are not relying on perpetrators I suppose making admissions, and if they don't, then taking the robust action of going to court, because there are other options, like you say, around outcome 22. So it's just looking at that whole picture and making sure that we're rebalancing and recalibrating our evidential thresholds. And like I say, because of our workforce and the training that we're doing around out-of-court disposals, which is ongoing at the minute, I'm confident that we will use more out-of-court disposals appropriately where necessary, and we've got advocates in custody now to help us engage with youths to make sure that we get an out-of-court disposal and that we aren't putting youth into the criminal justice system.
Okay, because that is a major issue for the youth justice system, and it really takes us to try and understand why this is happening and how we can, in a way, not necessarily mitigate it, because if individuals are committing crime, they need to be dealt with, but are our processes correct and able to be flexible to the needs of the individuals coming through the door, which is obviously a concern not only for the youth justice system but also for ourselves. So it's really important that we address that, so thank you for that. Moving on, there is a question from Shipler from Baseford, and this is about the force's response to hate crime, and specifically how much evidence is required before a persistent offender can be prosecuted for either racist targeted behaviour against vulnerable adults. What are the challenges in investigating and prosecuting hate crime, and what is being done to overcome them? There's also a note here, positive outcomes and charge rates for hate crime have increased by plus 1.4% over the previous year, alongside a reduction of minus 1.7%. in victims not supporting investigations. So I think you've kind of touched on it, but if you could just sort of explore it a little bit more for us in relation to hate crime and how we go about prosecuting, and sometimes why those prosecutions don't come to fruition.
Yeah, so in terms of the scenario given with a persistent offender, that really there should be no excuses around that, but again, it's that quick engagement with victims, capturing the evidence as quickly as possible, so ensuring that reporting is done as soon as possible after the event, so building that trust to do that, using other sectors to assist. Again, some people just want the behaviour to stop. We do have a good positive outcome rate, but I have noticed that sometimes attrition at court is higher for hate crime, because perhaps that's not what the victim wanted all along, was to go through to court. So it's really having victim care wrapped around victims to support them through that process, and making sure that we're using other disposals and focusing on the perpetrator as well, and focusing on them and diverting them away from offending.
And I know that the force monitors satisfaction among victims of hate crime. What does this information tell us, and how is it being used to improve the police service response? Just a bit of a note really, victim satisfaction has risen over the previous year to 86.4%, surpassing the force's target despite the recent violent disorder. So yeah, just sort of, can you give us some sort of information in terms of how are we using the information that we have to improve our services? Because the issue around hate crime is all about confidence, and if there's no confidence, then crime isn't reported. And we know that we've had violent disorder. We've also had the issue around Gaza. So we're kind of aware that the figures in terms of hate crime probably aren't an accurate picture on what's really going on the ground.
Yeah, so if we look at the surveys, around the satisfaction surveys in more detail, where people are less satisfied with how we deal with hate crime is where people are a repeat victim. So, for example, taxi drivers or shopkeepers that are repeatedly targeted just because of their profession, or working in a hospital or something like that, even police officers that are targeted. And it's happened to me again, what are you doing about it? So our focus is really on identifying repeat victims, and making sure that we are reassuring them, taking quick responsive action against repeat perpetrators as well. So that's our area of focus for hate crime.
Okay, thank you for that. Just moving on to the last question that I need to ask is around domestic violence. Just a bit of detail and information around that, please. I can see that there has been a strong focus on increasing preventative measures for domestic abuse, including greater use of domestic violence protection orders and notices. However, we have also seen a rise in the domestic abuse related offence over the last year. What do we understand to be the reason for this?
So if we look at the drivers of domestic abuse, people have more complex needs. So for example, within the MAROC arrangements, within our Sexual Offences Referral Centre, we're looking for more specialist counsellors that are able to support victims who have complex needs and aren't able to get out of relationships, and also reviewing our interventions for perpetrators as well. So it's that whole social problem really around people's vulnerabilities that we need to be really aware of as to why domestic abuse is increasing.
Okay. And how effective do you think the DVPOs and DVPNs in terms of compliance and breaches are? And is the rise in DA reports presenting any specific resourcing challenges? And if so, what is being done to manage them? Just for the sake of the community, DVPOs are domestic violence protection orders, and DVPNs are domestic violence protection notices.
Okay. Yeah, so DVPN is the one where the police authorise it for 36 hours while we're waiting for it to go to court, and actually they're only effective if we're policing the conditions that are applied to them. So through our prevention hub we've got Operation Saltash, which is where officers go out routinely to check people are complying with their conditions. We've had our first conviction for a breach of a DVPN as well. So that process is working, so that should provide reassurance. And again, we can consider other offences such as witness intimidation and threats. So we're really focusing on going back to victims and not just considering the end point being the issuing of the DVPO, it's that monitoring of it thereafter. Sorry, what was the last part of the question?
Is the rise in DA reports presenting any specific resourcing challenges, and if so, what is being done to manage them?
The resourcing challenges are around the increase in high-risk domestic abuse, and that is where we've put additional resources into our domestic abuse teams, so the additional supervision and the additional resources as well, just to make sure that we are having the time to spend with victims and using the IDVA support network as well to support victims. So initially where somebody might not want to go through court straight away, at least we can apply bail conditions to offenders, use the IDVA service to support that victim until they're ready to come forward. So yes, there's an increase, we accept we can't do it on our own, and that's why we're using other services and putting resources in.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. Thank you for answering that concisely and precisely. Michelle?
No, thank you.
Okay, Dan? No? Absolutely fine. Okay, so in terms of the session, I now close the session. Thank you for the officers that have attended, and thank you for your input. Most welcome. Thank you.